You're welcome.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special edition of the Disneyverse podcast. My name is Michael, and it is great to be here today. Of course, we're kind of at a field trip today. We got the Partridge bus out here, but that's all right. We're here at the Presidio in San Francisco, California, joined by Miss Terry. Trish, actually.
And yes, Trish. I know it's hard to tell us apart, Michael.
You guys are like there. Here's Miss Vicky. Hello, Vicky.
Well, hello.
Hello. And then there's Miss Terry.
Hello.
Eduardo.
Hello, I'm just a tag along. I'm not part of the show.
There's Michelle.
Hello. Always use the name of the place when you're looking on GPS.
Yes, it was very difficult. And then we have Vicky's husband. What's your name, sir?
Russell.
Russell, hello. Nice to meet you. So we're here in the Walt Disney's Family Museum. Now, this is a very unique building because this was a former military barracks here in the San Francisco Bay Area. So it's a pretty unique facility. So we are actually going to be walking around. We are here in the main lobby of the Walt Disney's Heritage Museum, and it's a very interesting facility. Lots of different unique little things to see here. So we're just going to have a walking tour of the museum. Terry, Trish, and many others have been here before. So what are some of the unique things when you see right away here in the museum?
Well, right in the lobby, they have all these display cases of all the awards that Walt Disney was presented over the years. They even have a case over here that has all the Oscars that he won.
Yeah, it looks like some Oscars, looks like a Golden Globe, a Grammy Award nominations, and plenty as well.
Slightly down there's a Seven Dwarfs one too, with all the Seven Dwarfs one with all the Seven Dwarfs and the really big one. It's in the case right over there.
So when we get big and popular, we'll have the same exhibit, right? When we come here as well in the Presidio, something like that.
Totally.
All right. Absolutely. So.
Because if we did, you would be able to leave it in subject.
Now, we're here at the museum, and right off the bat, there are plenty of different awards. Right off the bat, you go in here and you notice that Walt has won many awards. There's an exhibit here where he has received accolades from the Motion Picture Herald Association, the looks like some Peabody Awards, plenty of Golden Globes, but we are here at the one exhibit where he shows his Academy Awards. And the Academy Awards, as we all know, is the big feature when it comes to filmmaking. You can automatically just, if you win an Academy Award, you're pretty much set for life. So this is clearly something that, and then of course, right here.
Pooh and the Blustery Day.
What's that?
Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day.
Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day. That's right. How many Academy Awards did he win?
I think is it 42 or 36?
All right.
So he was formerly Meryl Streep back in the day when he won all that. Lots of just wonderful things.
Yes.
Now, continuing before we actually enter into the museum itself, the lobby has a lot of great special little features, and one of those is the Disneyland replica, the Disneyland apartment. Of course, the Disneyland apartment is right above Walt's firehouse, and usually Walt would just go in there, host people, but for the most part, he would use it as his own residence. And Dad and Mother spent many weekends in the apartment, often with some of their grandchildren. They decorated in the Victorian style they both knew and loved, and that was by Diane, who is the curator, I believe, of this museum, who brought the museum to existence.
And that's Walt Disney's daughter. She sadly passed away a few years ago.
Yeah, so Michelle, what do you think about all this so far?
I was just trying to get a picture of her daughter. She wouldn't smile. No, I think it's amazing. This is pretty neat. I didn't realize this was over the firehouse. I guess I knew that, though.
Well, and of course, that lamp that they have right there, they would light that every time Walt was in the park, and it would let everybody that came in the park would know that Walt Disney was in Disneyland somewhere.
And that light is continuing on to this day, every single day at the park.
Yes, they switched it to an electric light, so they don't have to keep refilling it with oil and everything like that.
Right.
Fire hazard, stuff like that. But.
And the lamp is pretty neat because it reminds me of most lamps that you would find in your grandparents' house or your mother's house or something. So it's pretty neat. So Terry, clearly we're going to break into the Walt's apartment when we go in there next time.
I have been in the apartment, and what's cool about
how'd you get into the apartment?
Walk in Walt's footsteps tour.
Oh, okay. I thought you were broken.
No, these are actually the original furnishings. So they've redone most of the stuff that's in his apartment now. It's similar in style, but this is the stuff that's actually from his apartment. So that's cool.
Yeah, this is very, very unique. So,
short chair.
Well, it's Vicky loves that chair. She's like, "Can I get a replica of that chair?" Yes. So continuing on with the museum has a lot. We're still just kind of scoping just the lobby of it. There's just plenty of other things here as well. Just the awards that he's won, a lot of the proclamations that he has won, whether it be for lifetime membership to the Screen Directors Guild of America, to Key to the City of San Francisco. There's just so many different recognitions that he has won. Things from the military, the Coast Guard, the Interior Department. So just the amazing just artifacts that he has won throughout the years. And of course, don't forget, folks, it has just been brought to my attention that this area of Walt Disney's Family Museum, which, by the way, is in the Presidio, very, very wonderful views of the Golden Gate Bridge as well as the San Francisco Bay Area, but it's also a place for Pokemon. And so if you're a big Pokemon fan, you definitely want to come check out this area as well. Before we head into the museum, one last little artifacts here, just continuation. Looks like we have a lot of different universities that have given Walt Disney recognition. Places from USC to Cambridge University actually also gave him president as well. So we all knew Walt Disney was one of those curators that clearly loved everything that he did and everything that he portrayed on film, but everyone loved Walt in general. So
On the podcast, right?
So basically, we're here with Marilyn here at the Walt Disney Family Museum. Marilyn, thanks for being on the show, although you wanted to or not.
Hi there.
So, thank you for letting us here. We appreciate that. So, what are you going to see in the museum today?
You're going to see the history of animation as told by Walt. He's narrating his life, and you'll go through the museum and hear all about what Walt did, some of the amazing things. He's an amazing person.
Well, we all love him as well. We're huge Disney fans, so thank you for being on the show as well. Do you need my ticket as well?
I do.
All right.
Make sure you don't take flash photography.
Oh, we certainly will. Thank you so much. We appreciate that. All right, so we are walking into the museum right now. Today we have Spotlight Talks about Mickey Mouse. We have Walt's hobbies, and Imagining Disneyland is our big feature here as well. So right off the bat, when you come in here into the main feature part of the lobby, it starts out with Walt's youth when he was first born. Talked a lot about his way he had it. Right off the bat, the greatest wealth a man may acquire is the wisdom that he gains from living, and sometimes out of the small beginnings comes the forces that shape a whole life. That was by John Tucker Battle, screenwriter, so dear to my heart.
And that picture is a picture of Walt at 9 months old, and you can actually see the same picture in the Baby Center in Disneyland.
Yes, and it's a picture right off the bat you see of Walt Disney at 9 months old, probably forced to take that picture by his parents, but you know, that's okay because at that point we're all done that by our parents. So. Okay, so we are here now talking about Walt's story, and you brought up something, Michelle?
Yes, Elias. Elias says his father, correct? Yes, and so basically the reason why we got Walt Disney in California is because a heavy frost destroyed their orange crop. They bought an orange grove and it failed.
So they moved to an orange grove in Anaheim. So they're a family obsessed with oranges here. So, and as we continue on in the early portion of Walt's life, it talks a lot about his family heritage. It's talking a lot about, like Michelle just said, about the family moving from Florida to Southern California because of the frost, but clearly showing a lot of his pre-animation, talking about him being a young artist. Now, when Walt did grow up and got a little bit older, he did live in the cities of Kansas City and Chicago. His interest in drawing intensified. He had a lot of young drawings here in the museum, things that are original artifacts. Obviously, they've been reincorporated now, but clearly there's a lot of different artifacts that he has here in the museum. Morgan, did you want to have a comment?
Hi.
Hi. We're here with Vicky now in the museum. Vicky, what do you think so far?
I think it's fabulous. Look at all these family pictures and all the cool history. Anyone who wants to know anything about Walt Disney has to come to this museum.
Well, there's everything in here, and they have memberships as well. So is this your first time here?
This is my very first time.
It is your very first time. Well, it's my very first time as well, too. So this is pretty incredible, awesome. This is amazing. As we're getting close to the end of the exhibit, the first part of the exhibit, talks about his efforts in the war. So Walt was a very important figure in the war, not necessarily just with the troop morale, but also was a part of the war as well. In fact, Walt was a part of the war, so much so that he forged his documents. Flora signed papers, signing the papers without Walt knowing, or without her knowing. He changed his birthday, and then after that, he was on his way to France to serve in the military. You know he forged his documents. I'm here with Terry and Trish. You know he forged his documents. You know that's a pretty important deal.
He forged a document that his mom wrote so he could join the ambulance corps and go to France when he was 16. She wrote 1901 and he changed the 1 to a 0 so he could run off at 16 to France to be in the ambulance corps.
They used to do stuff like that a lot, especially it's almost like Captain America-ish kind of.
No, but he did it, and like I think it was like 2 days after he did it, the war ended. So he still went to France to help with cleanup and stuff, but he never saw active war.
Yeah.
Clearly they were intimidated by Walt Disney going over the war. When they saw, they're like, oh, this guy's coming over, we're going to have to end the war.
And then he started drawing things on the sides of the ambulances and things, so that's, where he was doing some of his first art.
Well, and I was mentioning the fact that there's a part of the wall where it kind of shows his very first parts of his animation. In fact, there's a book over here that kind of shows that he was in some newspaper articles and that he did some artistic things for different newspapers across the country. Okay, so that's the first part of the museum. Now we're getting into more of his early career. Now, this is the part of the museum where you see him actually going into business. And right off the bat, you're seeing him with some of his early film work. A lot of the film work we have here has to do with when he was not just the war effort in the previous part, but also doing work in general. Looks like he did. He was part of a company called Laugh-O-Grams. Laugh-O-Grams Films was based out of Kansas City, Missouri, and that's where Walt got his business start. Walt looks like. What do you think Walt did with Laugh-O-Grams?
He's tried to experiment with different tricks of photography and animation. He tried to be innovative even from a very young age.
Dan, what are you pointing out over there?
Walt's early experiments. There's videos on the wall of some of the early drawings and films that he made, just experimenting with what he could do with drawing and animation.
Yeah, in fact, this is based out of, like I said just a moment ago, it's based out of Kansas City Museum. I keep saying Kansas City Museum. It's actually Kansas City, Missouri, so I apologize for everyone in Missouri for calling you guys this museum instead of Missouri. But, in fact, here's quotes from Walt right now.
Made the little advertisements for theaters. It's equivalent to what you see in TV commercials today, Put your winter coat in early, Get your fedora block for the winter and all those kinds of things. I used sort of little puppet things. We didn't draw them like we do today. I used to make little cutout things, and joints were pinned, and we'd put them under the camera, and we'd maneuver them and make them do things.
So Walt was talking a lot about his different things that he was doing in the early years. This is pre-Mickey, 1928. Now we are here with Morgan. Morgan is my daughter. She's also a huge Disney fan. So Morgan, did you just think that he just created Disney just out of nowhere, or are you kind of pretty interested about everything you're seeing so far about him?
I'm pretty interested.
Yeah. But see, who thought that just a simple, humble mouse had a beginning, and they're showing even before. It's pretty cool, huh?
Yeah.
So we are about ready to head into an elevator. We don't know where this elevator is going to go to. We have a feeling it could be like the Haunted Mansion elevator, where there's pictures on top. We actually don't believe that, but
maybe it's like Tower of Terror. I hope it doesn't.
Yes, at the very, very top, there's the dial.
Oh, I'll stay right here. We're good.
All right, so Michelle's not going to stay with us. She's going to.
Don't do Tower of Terror.
Well, one more. There's room for one more. Welcome, foolish mortals. Eduardo is in the spirit of Disney. Though this is pretty cool. The museum is wonderful, but we're just about to reach into a whole new world, a new fantastic point of view. All right, so we are entering the elevator, which looks like a cable car. A train car.
Yes,
cable car, train car.
Just like the one Uncle Johnny used to work at.
Yes.
For his entire life.
So we are all. Billy is coming on in. Billy, we have room for one more.
There's always room for one more.
That's right. So, my advice, please, no one fart on the elevator here. That would be great.
That would be that would be Michael, who usually farts.
The big day, the day I got on that California Limited. I just was free and happy.
All right, we are now out of the elevator. Thankfully, no one passed any gases. That's fine. And my claustrophobia, I was able to handle it. Yeah. There we are creeping out now. And we are now into the Hollywood section of the Walt Disney Family Museum. And Walt came into Hollywood and arrived in around August of 1923 with just $40 in his pocket and a coat and a pair of trousers that didn't match. So clearly he was coming to Hollywood not necessarily for the experience of Hollywood, but he wanted to make his stardom. Vicky, what do you think about this?
This is awesome. Look at all the pictures and all the history. I can't believe he came to Hollywood with nothing.
He literally, and that's how they all did back in that day. They absolutely came with nothing. And the museum itself, it is definitely just, you couldn't tell that just from the outside of the museum. It looks like just some basic barracks. This is a complete wonderful experience. Now in the museum, they do have different, looks like billboards of his projects, but they're video showing some of his very early cartoons. And in the museum here in the Hollywood section, they actually showing two of his cameras that he actually used in his productions. There's the Bell Howard camera and the Paith camera. The Paith was a workhorse camera of the film industry. Walt bought a used model on his arrival in Hollywood, adapted for stop-motion filming, which basically would help with his animation work. The Bell and Howard camera was the live-action portions of the Alice comedies were filmed with a camera very similar to the one that is in here in the museum. Now, one of my observations I've noticed personally coming in the museum is a pretty featured character named Alice. You guys are a little bit familiar with that.
Yes, the Alice comedies. Walt was taking live action and mixing it with animation. He was the first one to do that.
And that was way before anyone else's time.
Yeah, he was, again, that was trying to do something that somebody else had never done before. So he took a live little girl and put her in cartoons and made a whole series. And it was pretty popular for a long time.
It kind of brought everything as far as the future of animation like 70 years before Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Absolutely, and people don't realize that these little shorts existed. Everyone thinks about later films and everything else, not realizing that even back in the silent era, Disney was already breaking ground.
I'm starting to think that Walt Disney was a time traveler. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but he's one of those time travelers. I mean, it's insane on how much he's able to just see everything way in advance. All right, so we have left that portion of it, and now we are starting to look at for Steamboat Willie. We're getting into the Disney part. This is where Mickey Mouse was born. Not just Mickey, but Oswald as well. Oswald's one of those characters that you really don't see very, very much. All right, so we're here at a synchronizing sound. This is one of the ways that they had to do it back in the early years of animation. We have put our earphones on. Me, Terry, and Trish are going to participate in this. I am the red character. Trish is going to be the yellow, and Terry will be the blue. So we're going to try to figure this out. Yellow... Oh, I messed that one up. Sorry. See, I would be fired as an animator right off the bat. So, see how this is going to go here. I'm hitting it. Did it work? right, so we are going to try this here. Ready? We're about to try to match sound effects. So I just pulled a cat's tail. That's interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so here we go.
He's red, she's blue.
Okay, so we're starting off. Terry and Trish are far and away superior than me. Mickey is pulling the tail of the goat. Now I got to bang the drum.
To the time.
I got this down. Okay, I may not be a Disney animator, but I could be a Don Bluth.
Dad, your red's not there.
Clearly, I got to pull the cat's tail.
Keep pulling it.
Oh, sorry. I was not pulling the cat's tail. Okay, I'm now fired.
No, it just means you lose. Good job, everyone.
That was horrible.
Man, we failed. It's fine.
That was awesome. So we were all trying to synchronize our sound. I just kept hitting the button. I kept hitting the drum for no reason. That was interesting. That was fun. So that just shows you as one of those examples on how you synchronize sound, and sound is so important. So going forward, if you ever look at sound again in the Academy Awards and turn the channel, I have a little bit more of appreciation for that. So that was pretty fun. So there's a really important part of the museum in here with just this room, and it's not just basically showing with the very, very early Mickey Mouse, as Terry joined me here. There's really just the sense of just synchronizing the sound on how it all works. It's not just turning on a Saturday morning cartoon, you just think there's doing this. There's a whole team effort that goes with it.
Yeah, and over here we got an entire wall that is frame by frame by frame how they would put together the Steamboat Willie and how many drawings it takes to make a couple of seconds of film.
Yeah, it's insane on just the amount of lithographs and the drawings that are taken. I mean, there's literally, when you see a cartoon that can take months, I mean, they literally can take months to just create one animated featured cartoon, let alone a movie.
Yes, it takes forever. Every single frame has to be drawn out by hand at this point. No computers, no and help of any kind. It's all hand drawing, hand coloring, everything.
Yeah, so if kids are hearing this, you're just thinking you can do something on a computer. They had no computers back then, back in the 1920s, early 30s. So, I mean, it's insane. We're heading over to Vicky, who apparently is ordering her Mickey merchandise. I didn't know you're already placing your order already. We haven't reached the museum yet, or museum store, I should say.
Oh, well, no, I already went to the gift store, and I already spent a lot of money.
Okay, well, I still got to get that, so there'll be a chance for round two. So check this out, Vicky. We have a glass encase of a lot of the early Mickey Mouse, kind of like how it was designed, the merchandise of it compared to how it is now. I mean, clearly it's not going to look replica to how it was on television, but really this was another way for Walt Disney to capitalize on the merchandise. And you know what, everyone likes Mickey Mouse. Let's go ahead and capitalize on spending money on it.
Absolutely. It just, again, he was a visionary, and he realized that people wanted merchandise that ties it in to the cartoons that they were looking at. And Mickey Mouse has been a very popular character for sale since about the beginning.
Yeah, Mickey Mouse, and I think Coca-Cola was probably another one of those type of things that people wanted to buy as well. So, I mean, it kind of goes hand in hand.
Oh, yes. And when you look at the interesting changes to the Mickey Mouse toys over the decades, where now he's a very cutesy representation that actually looks a little more like the cartoons today. You have these very, sometimes creepy looking Mickey Mouses. But they're still interesting.
Well, and like you see pictures like on Facebook of like kids around like the Easter Bunny or Santa Claus. They look like not just friendly but very frightening characters.
Oh, good heavens, yes. Some of the same time frame, the 20s, 30s, and 40s, the Santa Clauses and the Easter Bunnies definitely looked more like criminals and less like fun.
Yeah, Santa Claus just got out of jail there, so. Now, Trish, you pointed out something interesting. We have some Mickey Mouse watches. Should I go ahead and get the knife and break them out for you now?
Well, those are kind of one of the holy grails as far as Disney collectibles.
All right, so let's talk about that. What do we got?
They're the Ingersoll. Is that how you say that? Yeah, I think Ingersoll.
See, I know I can never pronounce anything, so I'm fine.
I'm pretty, yeah. Ingersoll.
Ingersoll.
Thank you. I'm good. I'm bad. Yeah. But those are kind of like the holy grail of Mickey Mouse watches.
Do you know what an estimated value what this is mean here?
I do not.
Okay. So, I mean, clearly, just anything that's behind the glass case here clearly is a couple dollars. I would say at the very, very least. Okay, so that leaves the Mickey Mouse introduction room. We're headed into now the 1930s. The 1930s, obviously, Walt is Mickey Mouse has been created, and we're getting into more of Technicolor. And some of his shorts, right off the bat, The Practical Pig was a silly sympathy with... Symphony. Did I say sympathy?
You said sympathy.
Okay, so clearly I need to go to English class. I did once that, but... Symphony. Yes, there we go.
Flower and Garden was the first one.
Flower and Garden?
Flowers and trees.
Flowers and trees.
The first Technicolor Disney cartoon.
First one. What was the second one?
Well, I don't know.
We're going to find out. Let's go, right? We're here in the museum. We'll know it. Not Missouri Museum. All right, so there's one part that I just kind of caught a glimpse of. And that is a video demonstration on how cartoons are made. And there are just people sitting behind a desk, and they're rolling around just carts of ink, where you literally have to come around and do that. And right here, you do see some of the examples of the ink that was used for art. Now, obviously, this is not Walt's specifically his colors, but clearly it shows kind of like, okay, well, here's some reds, but here's a different type of red, here's a different type of orange. So there are some different drawings in here. Morgan, what do you think about all this?
It's amazing.
It's amazing. It is amazing, absolutely. Now, one of the things that a lot of people may not know about is a gentleman by the name of Pat Powers. So Trish was telling me a little bit about Pat Powers. So kind of condense this. What is Pat Powers? Who is Pat Powers, and what is his evil intentions?
He stole Oswald.
Yes, he stole Oswald. So why did he steal Oswald?
Because he...
Well, it's true. He did steal, right?
Well, he married, I can't remember her name. Do you remember her name, Terry?
I do not know her name.
It was the lady that Walt was originally working with the Alice comedies. And after she married Pat Powers, because, if a woman got married, the husband got to take over everything, he became in charge of everything, and he decided he was going to screw Walt out of everything. He found out that they actually owned the right to Oswald the rabbit, not Walt, and so he went behind Walt's back and took all of his animators and basically said, okay, Walt, you're gonna work for this much less money, and you're gonna produce this much, and there's nothing you can do about it. So Walt had to decide whether or not he was going to do what Pat Powers wanted, or if he was going to leave, and he was going to leave Oswald behind. And so he ended up leaving Oswald behind. But you know what? That's what led to the discovery or the invention of Mickey Mouse.
That's right. So Pat Powers, in a way, is kind of one of those blessings, but at the time he was not a blessing. He was more of a adversary than an ally. So another part of the museum is talking more about storyboarding, and this is very important in animation. Terry, give us a little bit of background on that.
Okay, so this one's got some concept art and some storyboarding for The Old Mill, which is one of the very old cartoons. It was one of the first ones they tried to do really realistic, I think. And so you have panels that show plain drawings with some art suggestions. It says like cut to bird's nest, birds hatch, see their papa return with food. Next one says morning shows eggs all hatched, father brings nestlings to a worm. So they're like simple drawings with how they're going to go frame by frame and make this come together into a story.
Yeah, it's not just all about animation, it's also about telling a story about what's going on from A to Z, let alone get to that point. All right, so we have made over to the character development over here. I'm joined by Michelle. So, Michelle, what are you looking at?
Actually, I'm looking at the three little pigs and a bunch of different characters that were drawn. I recognize this one, the tortoise and the hare. I remember this one. It's pretty neat, like just the history. Oh, and I remember him too. That's the tortoise. Oh, that's the tortoise from The Tortoise and the Hare. Yeah. It was a cartoon. Mm-hmm. It's and that was on when I was little.
Building characters.
It's how they draw multiple drawings to figure out what they want a character to look like and how they want it to move and be to make a certain character how they want it to look in the cartoons.
Ferdinand the Bull. Now, Ferdinand the Bull, I think is kind of an interesting story because, you know, it's kind of showing a menacing character that you think is a bull, but in reality, he's got a kind heart. And I think that's what Walt Disney really wanted to portray a lot in a lot of his characters. You could be an intimidating factor, or you can be this really, really bad kind of character, and you can be there.
Go give a talk.
All right, and Michelle wanted to say something.
Okay, so we're watching all these cartoons too. There's the Ugly Duckling, and Morgan remembered that. And if you guys remember watching the Disney show when you were a kid, or even when the Disney Channel first came on, a lot of these old cartoons used to be the reason why the Disney Channel existed in the first place. So a lot of these like cartoons, not all of these are anything that kids are going to be watching unless they happen to stumble upon it on YouTube. So if you've never seen the older cartoons like the Ugly Duckling, you haven't seen Ferdinand the Bull, if you hadn't seen the Big Bad Wolf, the Three Little Pigs, look those up, the Tortoise and the Hare, because that's some amazing cartoon work that we just don't see on TV anymore.
Oh, exactly. And Morgan, you saw you remember the Ugly Duckling?
Yes, I watched it on like a movie thing.
And what do you think about it?
I love it.
Love it? You know what's funny is you're very talkative until you get on the microphone, then you're not talkative anymore. So one of the nice things here at the Walt Disney Family Museum is they have different character talks. So they're going to talk about Mickey Mouse here in just a couple of minutes. Unfortunately, we can't record it, but we will give you kind of hypnosis on what that recording is here in just a couple of moments. But as we're about ready to hear the talk, we got everyone back here. So, girls, Vicky? Sure. What do you think? What do you think about this?
About the talk or about the museum in general?
Just everything.
I feel like I could live here.
Okay, so we need to escort Vicky out of here. Let security know about this.
Oh, come on, but it would be so cool to just sit in here and read everything and watch every little movie. And I don't know, I think I could spend hours in here.
Now, before we go any further, I do want to remind people that the Walt Disney Family Museum is privately owned and they do accept donations. So if you are interested in doing a donation to the museum, or if you're looking for family memberships, visit their website, waltdisney.org, and they'll give you all the information that you need to get a membership at the Walt Disney Family Museum. Okay, so we're currently right now in the talk about Mickey, but there's one thing I do want to point out. The earliest drawings known of Mickey Mouse are currently here at the museum. They are in the sound room that I was talking about a few minutes ago. But again, the earliest known drawings of Mickey Mouse are currently here at the Sound Museum. All right, we've reached the next part of the museum, and we have reached the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs got Walt Disney 475 different Oscar wins. I think it's won in another Oscar last year. Don't you think that, Terry?
Totally.
Yeah, I totally won that. The best picture goes to Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. All right, so here it's a little bit kind of like what they were talking about, kind of like the distribution. They were talking about how the movie was made and how it related to a lot of human characters. Marjorie Belcher, besides acting as the live-action model for Snow White, Marjorie also appeared as Snow White in the 1938 Tournament of Roses parade, wearing the exact costume. Very, very interesting, because that's how Walt did a lot of his early work. He used a lot of people to portray the characters, and then he would have the drawings out of them. And of course, as you come into the part of the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, they are talking about the premiere at the Carthay Circle, which, by the way, that's also one of the inspirations at Disney's California Adventure, is when you walk into it is the Carthay. But just the appreciation for Walt during this, it was a big star-studded premiere. There's even the characters dressed up as Mickey and Minnie, which were not pretty back in the 1930s. But you know what? People were just excited. They were enthusiastic. And just an amazing time. Talking about some of his merchandising, the music that he released for it as well. It was really the first film that not just appreciated the animation, but also appreciated the marketing aspect, the music aspect of it. It was just an incredible experience. All right, so we just left the Snow White room. We are now going into where Walt really took off as far as his business model. There was a lot of different animations he had. He had Pinocchio. Morgan just brought up Pinocchio. Did you want to talk about Pinocchio? Yes, so there is Pinocchio. And just looking at the way they have the setup for the Pinocchio exhibit, there's a lot of different drawings that was created. There was a lot of different storyboards involved, kind of some of his ideas. Also in the portion of it where Walt really took off, there's also the premise of him getting collaboration with a lot of different elements of his business. Leopold Stotowski led a collaboration that produced one of Walt's most ambitious films, Fantasia. Now, as everyone knows, with Fantasia, that was a lot of his art was really put into center stage, along with the music involved as well. Also, one part of the part here in the museum is about the multiple cameras. Now, the boys went on a binge of gliding the Lily. We had developed the multi-plane camera, and they went wild with it, panning over rooftops and turned down streets, turning corners. As Eduardo scares me, but Eduardo, let me ask you this: so, what do you think about the?
No, you're wrong. You're absolutely wrong.
I know. Well,
you should have never asked. You know what? That. Just turn in your card right. Turn in your man card right now. You're wrong.
My man card. I don't know where my man card came from. So, the multi-plane camera. What do you think about this?
Big, very big. Wow. Okay. Yeah.
There's really no reason to get a shot with this bad boy. This thing's, what do you think, about 15 feet tall, 20 feet tall? It was the eye can see. It went beyond miles into the great wilderness. No,
don't do that.
I won't do that. I won't do that. So your chair brought something very important. You said there's only 3 of these in the world?
There is. There's only 3, and one of them sitting right here. Not being used, obviously. I think they have better equipment now, but it's a really important piece of history because this was a innovation in how they made animated movies to look more realistic.
So a little bit more in depth on the multi-plane camera. This was a project that was introduced in the Old Mill, and Snow White came into ever great prominence in the feature that followed. The crane on display here at the museum demonstrates the principle. As the camera moves down into the scene, it approaches and passes some scenic elements, while others remain in the background. So this was basically, for example, if you ever look at this Beauty and the Beast, where they have that dancing part, how the camera drops down in an animation is just an amazing experience. So me and Vicky have reached the part of the museum where apparently people didn't like Walt Disney very much. What happened going on with that?
They were actually more angry at Roy and some of the business practices, and they wanted to unionize, and Roy did not want unions at all in the shop. So there was a strike for 3 months, and when the federal arbitrator got involved, he ended up giving the artist everything they wanted, and unfortunately Walt took it very personally and didn't understand that while he may in general have given his workers good benefits compared to some other companies, they wanted guarantees, and everyone can understand that.
That's incredible to think that, you know, everyone loves his work back in the 30s and 40s, but there are people that were trying to survive and be able to live off wages. It's kind of what we're seeing even to this day, you know.
Yes, even today there are issues with some of the parks and some of the Walt Disney companies where not all of their employees are paid a living wage.
It's incredible just to think about that. So this was such a traumatic time that there was hearings at the nation's capital.
Yes. Senator McCarthy, Joseph McCarthy, who basically went on witch hunts against anyone he thought was a communist, and that included anyone who was in Hollywood, anyone who was in a union. And unfortunately, Walt, who has such a bad taste in his mouth from the strike, gave a speech before it and made it his duty to get rid of communists, because there's often a mistake in where people who want, for example, a living wage or being a union is automatically a communist who wants to take over the American government.
And there's a lot of different movies out there that talk about the blacklisting and everything. But testifying, the events of the strike resurfaced 6 years later when Walt was asked to testify before the House Un-American Activities Committee about alleged communist infiltration of Hollywood. The Communist Party had become a force of U.S. labor struggles during the Depression, as Walt suggested in his testimony. Walt did say, "I definitely feel this was a communist group trying to take over my artists, and they did take them over. They distorted everything. They lied. There were no way you could ever contract anything that they did. They formed picket lines in front of theaters and called my plant a sweatshop, and that is not true." So there's a lot of labor issues. There's a lot of working issues that were going on. There were a lot of finger pointing, a lot of misdirections, but in the end result, it's pretty much turned out that this was something that was needed to just be fixed on the end. There was no communism going on. This was something that needed to be fixed on his end.
Yes, I absolutely agree, and I think that the Disney studios, especially the animation studios, became a better place for a long time because of the changes that were made.
It was good for the better, but they did go through a downward trend. So as we continue on, we talk a little bit more about Walt's influences, and we're getting more international. We have a Latin America section of Walt's trip here, as we have Trish joining us here now. Big Latin American experience for Walt.
Yes, there's actually a documentary called Walt and El Grupo, which is all documentary old footage of them going to South America. It was a goodwill tour to have a good relationship with South America, and so they made 2 movies from it. The Three Caballeros, which I know you know how to say, right?
Caballeros.
And Saludos Amigos.
Yes, and it continue on, obviously, with the more recent one with Coco.
Yes.
With Mexico. So they continue to this day have an influence on Latin American culture. As we continue on in the museum, we talk about the warriors, and this is a very common theme. Back in the 1940s, there was really a big war effort to support the troops, which, to this day, you still kind of get that a little bit. Now, there's a part of the museum which I didn't know about. There's pinups for servicemen from Walt Disney staff. So that's the lengths that we all went to support our troops. Some donated bonds of, war bonds. Walt decided to draw pictures of scantily clad women.
Scantily clad, they're not wearing clothes.
Well, I'm trying to be PG about this, okay? But
Wait, she's got socks on.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay, never mind.
Okay, so she's not fully nude. She just has socks on. Okay, that's great. Now, one of the things as well, not just with Walt drawing scandalously clad women, but he also made cartoons. In fact, a lot of cartoons back then, and not just Disney, but you're talking about like Bugs Bunny and Looney Tunes and all that, really had a lot of the anti-Japanese, anti-Germany theme with those.
Yes, there was one called Donald in Naziland, where Donald was dreaming he was a Nazi.
I remember one where Donald was working in a bomb plant. Is that the same one? Yeah. They made a lot of war-themed cartoons around that time. They made a lot of propaganda films for the war.
Yeah, very, very. Of course, you think now when you see a country that has cartoons where they talk about the opposing country, you get kind of interested about
The
that.
thing is when they were making these films, I mean, war wasn't funded by taxes; it was funded by war bonds.
Exactly. That's what we're talking about too. We were talking about the war bonds just a moment ago, but yeah, just everything about that. There's a movie about the stories of one of Hitler's children.
It'll come back. Okay.
So yeah, there was really a propaganda machine that was happening. And again, it's not just Disney, but it was really everybody to support around the United States, and that's how things were back in the 1940s. Even the 50s were the same way.
It mattered. People actually wanted to.
It did, absolutely. In fact, there is an article here in the museum, Films for the War Effort, a reduced program of Disney cartoon shorts now depicting Donald Duck in uniform continued to appear during the war. In the meantime, Walt was also producing training films for the military, some of them on highly technical and classified subjects, as well as special propaganda and public service shorts for theater showings. So one of those was Der Führer's Face lampoon Hitler out of the frying pan into the fire line, promoting conservation. The new spirit encouraged Americans to pay their income taxes promptly and support the war effort. Most remarkably of all the features was Victory Through an Air Power, based on Alexander Seversky's 1942 book of the same title. Unlike Snow White, Pinocchio, and other timeless tales, this was a strictly topical argument that a strong, unified air offense would bring about a decisive victory. So clearly, it's a very important part of the museum, I think, because it just shows how important it was back in the 40s that we would be unified in the war effort. And of course, we reached the end of the museum portion of the war effort where they were talking about the end of the war. After the war, it was quite a problem picking up the pieces. We didn't have any money because we were producing nothing, and our markets had been closed to us. Our pictures that we had made in 1940, 41, and 42, like Pinocchio, and some of those, had never received proper distribution around the world. Until the world market began to open up and we could get them circulated, we didn't have much income, and I had made too many short subjects. I've been writing during that war period on the inventory that I prepared, and that was by Walt Disney himself. So again, the war was produced by war bonds, and that was pretty much a lot of the money that was being driven to keep businesses open. All right, so now we've reached another part of the room, which is probably the first indication of Disneyland with all the special effects that are in this room. But this is more of a lot of his live action features. This is all post-war production, a lot of his live action. A lot of this room is interactive, so there's a lot of different things you can touch that would show you some of his different features that he made. He really needed to step up his production since the war ended because they needed to make money. They needed to do it in order for them to survive. And of course, what more live action movie that you can see but 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, one of the great classics. Vicky, why is that one of your favorite classic movies?
Well, it's got Kirk Douglas and James Mason in it.
Okay, so it's eye candy for Vicky. All right.
Well, I'm a huge Jules Verne fan, and I'm losing my ears. And thank you. And it's such a fascinating look at the future, which by the time the movie came out, we already had submarines. But it's still, I mean, look at the design they did just on the model. It was so cool. A little hokey now, but it was so cool back then.
Yeah, it's a little hokey. It looks like a, what do you think, like a swordfish or something? Or something like that? I don't know. Looks pretty interesting. Yeah, steampunk swordfish.
I love it.
So we reach the next room where we go back to kind of more of Walt's nostalgia, and one of the things that he has is a fondness of miniatures, and Trish was telling me a little bit about that. What are some of the things that he used to collect?
They're like miniature doll furniture. It's
in fact, we see some right over here. Yeah, we see some right over here. Plus, we also see some over there as well.
Yeah, there's like miniature tools, miniature guns, miniature plates.
So is this hokey as well? Or?
None of it's hokey. None of it's hokey. None of it's hokey.
You say that now.
We can run them over. Don't worry.
Yeah, she's got her car. She can run me over.
Furniture from any of the rides. They actually use the furniture in here to design.
What's interesting is that when Walt would travel, he would take his own food with him because he didn't like fancy food at all. He was very simple, so he would always take chili, beans, and Jello with him whenever he would go anywhere, and that's what he would eat.
Yeah, and in the museum there's an exhibit of just a couple of the cartons of Jello plus some of the cans of chili that he would bring as well. So yeah, he lived a pretty practical life. It wasn't anything that was overly extravagant.
Now in the D23 magazine, one year they printed a recipe for Walt's chili. I made it. It was the blandest thing I've ever tasted as far as chili goes.
I would think Walt Disney's recipe for canned chili is pick one can up from a supermarket and then take it home and eat it. That would be my thought.
Yeah, no, it was. I had to add so many spices to it to even get it remotely to where chili is today. But I can only imagine that for him that was pretty spicy.
Well, yeah, exactly. Since he might have something with his stomach that he couldn't handle spicy stuff too much. Now we reached kind of more of a glass hallway where you have a lot of not just the little bit more of his artifacts in here. We have more of a camera. Dick Borden's camera was in here for long lenses as well as special Kodak lenses as well. But also a very beautiful view of San Francisco Bay, particularly the Golden Gate Bridge. One of the best beautiful cities in the world by far. Now, towards the end of this hallway here, as we're getting to later in Walt's life, we have a particular bench. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, wow, that's just a beat-up bench. Whoa, no, it's not just any kind of beat-up bench. It is a historical bench. I think Vicki wants to tell me about it. She's going to take a picture of it.
I'm going to take a picture, so.
All right. Well, I'm doing it for the show. We do a podcast. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I know about the story about the bench. But I wouldn't
know what the level of people's.
Oh yeah, no, it's all right. So we
knowledge of
That's all right. So tell me about the bench.
Well, isn't this the bench that it was at a local park he used to take his kids to that inspired him to do Disneyland?
In fact, you're correct, but you didn't say it exactly the way it says right there on the thing there. It is actually a bench at Griffith Park. Now, Griffith Park is a prominent park in Southern California, and this is a bench park of the carousel where Walt spent many weekend hours with his daughters enjoying it. His daughter Diane recalls that he was never impatient but left them ride as long as they wanted to. Since his time in KC has been fascinated with amusement parks, remarking one of his friends, Rudy Ising, "I'm going to have one someday, but mine will be grown to be clean." And that was eventually the premise of a certain little adventure park, which hopefully will get some recognition someday, known as Disneyland. Okay, I'm walking into a room now, and this is holy moly. This is like the crown jewel, apparently, of the museum here. Wow, this is amazing. This is a room. It's hard to describe, so I'm going to do my very, very best. It is a room that is full of magic and wonder. Particularly, that is the model of Disneyland, which we're heading down there in just a second. But Trish, you were really wanting me to see this room, so I'm going to let you describe it for me because I'm at a loss for words.
Well, this is like the best room in the entire museum. It has it starts with Walt's train that he had in his backyard, the Lily Bell, and yeah, it's just amazing. It's the engine all the way to the caboose, and it's just big spiral room staircase, and there's a big huge display of Disneyland over there that has every ride that has ever been. They have them all smashed in together, even the ones that are no longer there. Yes.
I want that in my house.
That's what I said the very first time I came here.
Every Disney fan ever wants that.
I want that in my house. Okay.
Yes. I will clear out a whole room just to put that in my house.
We don't need a dining room table or
It wouldn't be the dining room, we'd take your room.
whatever. I don't care.
Devin's room.
Yeah, Devin's.
It's slowly but surely becoming Michael's room. I want the train. I want the train to go around our house.
That's where Walt actually sat, on the train.
Yeah.
At the front. There's a little cushion and everything.
Yes.
And I just want it to go around our house every day. And as people drive by, they can see us in the train. And we would have the Disney train.
And this is why we have the Disneyland Railroad.
365 days a year, not just Christmas.
Now look at this picture right here. Ward Kimball driving the train with Salvador Dali.
Nice.
on there. Salvador Dali and Disney were actually really good friends. They collaborated on some things. That could be explaining why some things are so weird on some Disney things. But yeah, I mean, have you ever seen the 1985 Disneyland celebration that they aired on TV? That was all designed by Salvador Dali, and it explains a lot. If you have not seen it, go look on YouTube. It is something special.
Art is amazing, though.
What picture is that?
Walt. It's just Walt running his train, and he looks so happy. His hands up in the air, he's smiling, he's having a good old time.
Yeah, Walt had a lot of friends that helped him build this backyard railroad, and Lily wasn't so happy about it because they had to move her flower beds that she had planted, but it was all worth it in the end.
Volunteer? Yeah,
Well, I think this is interesting because originally... Okay, so as Trish, everything said exquisitely. Actually, I lied. I didn't hear any of that, but that's just freaking... I mean, this is just amazing. But the one thing I noticed that is about Disneyland with some of the early plans was that this was actually supposed to be built in Burbank. Walt's Mickey Mouse Park on 16 acres in Burbank, which was across street from the studio, it began taking on more of the look that what we know today as Disneyland with the Old West look. We have the Mississippi River steamboats and steam trains, and there is a train of what Walt used to ride on as one of his little miniatures, as we discussed in one of the earlier rooms. So there was a event that happened on September 26th, in fact the weekend of September 26, 1953. Walt asked Herb Ryman to meet him at the studio. In the ensuing 48 hour straight marathon, Walt described every aspect of Disneyland in precise detail, every building, attraction, even how people would walk through the various lands, while Herb faithfully translated Walt's words into graphics. Although some facets would be modified during design and construction, Disneyland still reflects Herb Ryman's amazing artistic skills and Walt's incredible imagination. So he really had every little aspect from beginning to end of it. And of course, Disneyland, where you leave today and visit the world of yesterday and tomorrow. So one also the thing that Walt really did a lot well was about television and a television series, and Michelle was looking a little bit about that. Tell me about that.
Okay, well, we all know that I love Disney from TV initially, because my mom didn't take me to Disneyland until I was 13. But I'm looking at the early television and a picture of Walt with Ed Sullivan. I mean, anybody and everybody was with Ed Sullivan.
A really good shoe.
Really good shoe. So in the early 1950s, the networks NBC and ABC had expressed interest in a Disney television series. The ABC network agreed to invest in Disneyland in order to acquire Walt's television series. Not only did this contract help subsidize the park, but Walt's series would all actually be titled Disneyland and would be built around the same themes. The top 3 monitors shows clips from Walt's earliest television programs, 1 Hour in Wonderland, and episodes from Disneyland television series. Every time I'd get thinking of television, I would think of this park, and I knew that if I did anything like the park, I had to have some kind of medium like television to let the people know about it, see? So I said, well, here's the way I'll get my park going. It's a natural for me to tie in with my television. So I just sort of insisted that my Disneyland park be a part of my television. Walt. Later on in the show, you'll find that Disneyland, the place, and Disneyland, the TV show, are all part of the same. Walt on the first episode of the Disneyland series, October 27th, 1954.
So Walt really had an emphasis on not just the movie part, but also television as well. Terry, I know you were kind of looking at that as well, too. What do you think about all this?
Oh my gosh. Walt used television to get his vision of Disneyland built. He used it as a tool for advertising, basically, for everything he did, for movies, for television, for his parks, his hobbies. He learned to tie it all into television. And I can't wait for you to come over here and look at this model.
Yes, because I was itching. In fact, we were making a comment that we were going to put that in my house. But you know what? Because it's too big, I think we should split up into land. So what we should do, Terry, is we should say which land you want and then which land that I want, and we'll just kind of play it by ear. Are you okay with that?
I'm cool with that.
Okay. Well, it'll be like shared custody. We'll be like divorced parents, and we'll be sharing sharing all that. So yes, there is as you're going down a walkway. Again, the room in here is just incredible. I mean, this is really. It looks like Disneyland came in here. It's like, hey guys, we'll take it from here. Disneyland it has in the museum there is actually a miniature Disneyland park. Now, right off the bat, we are actually standing over Tomorrowland.
Yes.
Which is presented by Coca-Cola. But anyway, but you can see right here you have the envision. This is the original park. This is how it looked back on July 17, 1955.
I think they have some old mixed in with some new, I believe. But there are there's Carousel of Progress. There's the flying saucers that didn't last very long. There's the pirate ship all the way over there in Fantasyland. There's I think that's the wilderness ride.
Yeah, there was the Wilderness Trail. That was one of the ones where you can go on Stagecoach and ride along that. Now that is that turned into
there's a little wagon over there.
Right, and that actually is where Big Thunder is right now. And then later on, as it is towards the back corner of it, that's where they're going to have the Star Wars land. But yeah, you have the Matterhorn, you have the Jungle Cruise. That's still around.
Yeah,
that's still in place. Incredible, just absolutely amazing. Autopia as well.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the monorail. And, of course, you also have...
I think that's even the Home of Tomorrow right there.
Yes, the Home of Tomorrow. That was, I believe, part of the World's Fair.
I love the Home of Tomorrow.
Okay, so Michelle's jumping in here. The Home of Tomorrow.
I'm sad that it's gone.
I know, but the remnant of the Home of Tomorrow is still at Disneyland.
I
as well.
Had so much.
And of course, one of the things regarding Disneyland is that it was a very, very small fee to get in. But in order for you to ride the rides, you do have to pay that. Thus, that came the focus of the e-ticket attraction. The e-ticket attraction was the big time rides. They were the ones that you can literally scream and lose your voice on and everything.
We should count all of the attractions in here that don't exist anymore or don't exist in Disneyland anymore. There's a lot of them.
You can go a step further. If you take away all the attractions that are not there anymore, this would really be an empty map. I mean, there's still a few little elements that are still there. Though there's the Haunted Mansion over there in the distance over there, all the green
Pirates
guys.
right next to it. Jungle Cruise, Space Mountain, Matterhorn with the Skyway. Oh, the Skyway. It went away.
I really miss the Skyway.
Yeah.
And in fact, they just recently took down the last of the gondolas of the Skyway.
That was one of the things I remembered most.
But I do miss that. In fact, I miss that plus the People Mover. The People Mover.
One thing that people miss a lot is Adventures to Inner Space, the one where they're supposed to miniaturize you and put you on a snowflake. That one used to scare the crap out of me when I was a kid.
Well, and not just scared out the crap out of me, I actually threw up on that ride a few times. Every time I told you about that, I got sick on that one several times.
Speaking of miniaturization, am I the only one who wants to be miniaturized right now and just kind of jump down there and play? I could totally get into the teacups.
There was a
right
movie
now.
about that, I believe. There was a movie about being
I'm pretty sure we have Rick Moranis. I don't know, something about.
No, it's with Matt Damon.
Downsizing.
Downsizing, that's right.
I was thinking of a Disney movie.
Well, it could be that way too. It could actually be that way too.
I don't think this is opening day Disney because there's things that weren't open yet, but I do think this is retro Disney because there's no Toontown.
Right, yeah, this is definitely retro. In fact, we're trying to, once we do clarify what day and year this is or around that, we'll definitely take a look at that. We are getting pictures of all this stuff here on our tour, so anything you guys are seeing here, we're posting a whole bunch, so we do apologize for messing up your feed with 745 different pictures of our tour, but this is incredible to see this. So one of the things we're looking at right now is we're directly overhead Small World. Now, Small World, it's kind of a funny story about that one. That one actually was not originated at Disneyland. It actually was created at the World's Fair. I believe back in 1964 or something along those lines. That's when Small World was created. But what they did was they took it apart and then they disassembled it and made it its own little thing. As we continue our tour, we have come across, me and Terry have one of the first Autopia cars. This clearly is not safe and up to Disney standards for today, but in the early 1955, the original plan was to build 40 Autopia cars for use in the new Autopia ride, not Autotopia, which some people apparently like to say that, but that's okay. So as the project developed, Walt thought that we should have a couple of special cars rigged up as police cars, so ride operators could give rides to children too small to drive the actual Autopia cars. So he was thinking about about kids who didn't really have the opportunity to be able to ride the rides. He was thinking that everyone should have the opportunity to be experiencing Disneyland as itself.
Yeah, and this car is really adorable. It doesn't look like the ones that are in the park now. It almost looks like it has a stick shift in the middle and no door on the side, but it's very old-fashioned.
It's like a Dukes of Hazzard car. You would think that they're going to be, they would jump over Autopia, then they would magically freeze, and Wayne and Jaden said, well, those Duke boys are at it again. Will they be able to get some churros? We'll find out.
Look at the Autopia.
So now we have officially reached the front of the Disneyland miniature exhibit, and I'm eyeing this whole thing. First of all, thinking, how is this going to fit in my car? But nonetheless, it is a sight to see. It literally is. You're looking right at Disneyland if you're flying in.
I'm gonna go take a video.
This is just incredibly amazing, and I would definitely suggest anyone who would love to come experience Disneyland to do it just once in your life. But if you've gone to it as many times as I have, and anyone else who has, I would highly recommend you do so, because it's always fun. So we've reached a part of the museum here, continuing our Disneyland exhibit, where they're talking more about Disneyland's opening day. Now, obviously, July 17, 1955 is a huge day in the history of Disney, where Disneyland was first opened to the public. Art Linkletter was the host of the special edition. ABC was the broadcast channel, and it was something that had never been done or seen before. There have been amusement parks that have been coming and going even during that time, but nothing on the scale of what Disneyland was. This was an incredible moment in American culture history. Okay, so me and Trish have made over to the Greetings from Disneyland, and Trish, looks like we have some old Disney dollars here.
Well, they're Disney ticket books. Yeah,
the ticket books. That's right.
Yeah, they're because we used to have to pay a small fee to get in, and then you'd buy the ticket books, and they'd have tickets. It used to be A through D. That was what the first was, and then the E-ticket came around when Matterhorn and submarines and everything opened in '59. Then that's when they added the E-ticket.
Now you notice tickets were 75 cents for e-tickets. Clearly, there's nothing at Disneyland for 75 cents now. But I can imagine just having those ticket books, and you're just thinking to yourself, all right, we're going to go pick this ride. You can only pick certain rides. So they had these ticket books for quite a while. I mean, how long was it? How long did they have these books for?
They transitioned them out from 1982 to 1983.
That's right, because I do remember. I think we were there like one of the last days they had the e-ticket attractions before they decided to lump it into one day pass.
But look at that, a ticket book from the 1955, an adult was $2.50, and that was for tickets for the whole day.
And that's how much a glass of water is. A small, tiny styrofoam cup at Disneyland is now $2.50. There is also a proclamation. Let's see, we have a letter here, Mr. Ward Kimball. Just an example of Walt personalizing his experience. This was a letter that he wrote to a Mr. Ward Kimball. It gives me great pleasure to enclose your annual silver pass to Disney for the year 1957, and talking a little bit about Disney going forward and talking about the experiences. Terry's joining us right now. There is a ticket book for $2.50, Terry.
I want it.
Okay, let's. They're getting all the. You're getting all the knife. You get the glass cutters. We'll go ahead and get that if you can.
It looks like my ears.
It does. It does look like your ears. In fact, Terry has modeled ears for every room she has gone into, sometimes 2 or 3 per time. Okay, so we're kind of leaving the Disneyland exhibit. We're going back into the to the film part, and we're getting into more live action. And looks like we have The Parent Trap, Haley and was it just Haley Mills, or wasn't there Haley and Audrey? Or
no, Haley Mills played both parts.
Haley Mills played. That's right. Haley Mills did play both parts. Walt Disney's Swiss Family Robinson, The Castaways, and a lot of his movies, and they still do this to this day, but there was a sense of using the movies and incorporating the movie into the attractions with the Swiss Family Robinson tree, and you have a lot of different parts of that. Yes, we're actually over a train, and Terry's joined us.
Over a train. We're under it.
Are you afraid of your life?
No, but it's bottom view of Walt's train.
So you do realize we're in an earthquake zone, right?
I'm cool with that.
Okay, so but hey, how did Terry die? She died with Walt's train crashing onto her. But did she love life? She did.
I died wearing Mickey ears talking about Disney, so I'm good.
That's right. So this actually talks about another part of the museum where it has a little bit of a local feel for us here because we do live in the northern Nevada area. The Squaw Valley Winter Olympics, February of 1960. So Trish, you were telling me a little bit about that.
Well, Walt went to the Winter Olympics in Squaw Valley, and Art Linkletter went as well. And there wasn't a lot of snow until like the day before and the night of when the Olympics were starting. And it got so bad that the people that were supposed to be hosting the opening ceremonies couldn't make it to the opening ceremonies because of all the snow. So they asked Walt and Art Linkletter if they would step in and host the opening ceremonies. So they did.
And they've had a relationship for a long, long time, just a really good, solid working relationship.
Oh yeah, he hosted the opening day of Disneyland, and Walt was so low on funds from building Disneyland that he couldn't afford to pay Art anything. So Art was like, okay, well just pay me scale wages, which is basically like minimum wages. And he says, but give me the first 10 years of royalties from the Kodak Film Company. But in his mind, he, like everyone else, thought Disneyland was going to flop, so he thought that he was doing Walt a favor by offering to take that in lieu of regular pay. And of course, as we all know, Disneyland thrived, and Kodak was with the Disney company until the 90s, I think, or even the early 2000s. So he made a lot of money that day.
See, I would have asked for just a free lifetime membership into Disneyland or any Disney park.
Well, I mean, if at the time you don't know for sure it's going to be a lifetime. I mean,
but
it's
like when someone bought that stock of Apple, and then 35 or 40 years later, that's worth $500 million or something. So, but anyway, so February of 1980 was the Squaw Valley Winter Olympics, and in the exhibit, 1960. What did I say? 80. Okay, well we boycotted that one. But anyway, but we do actually have a replica of the torch that was. That's the real one. Oh, okay. That was a replica there. So this is the actual Olympic torch back in 1960.
Yes.
1960, which, let's see here, bronze medallion, 1960. And it has the actual torch. It also has the pins.
Pageantry pins.
The pageantry pins. And pageantry pins are still very popular to this day in Olympic circles. So another thing that Walt was a fan of, not just of parks and the Old West, but also presidents. And it's to this day, Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln is actually one of my favorite attractions. Not just because it's a nice thing you can kind of regroup and regather and everything, but again, it showed a lot of his history that he loved with the history of
It's for the World's Fair.
But he also loved the whole history of the presidents and everything.
Yeah.
And with that being said, we are here at the World's Fair selection. Now, the World's Fair selection was in 1964. You heard earlier about the House of Tomorrow. The House of Tomorrow was featured in the World's Fair along with It's a Small World. So everything that you hear about the Small World and you hear about the World's Fair, all was done by one man, Mr. Walt Disney himself. Now, obviously, the 1960s was a golden era for Disney as he continued his animation. He also was incorporating his live action, but he also started to not be well. Walt was experiencing some illnesses over the throughout. Trish is pointing out one of her favorite exhibits, and it's just a series of pictures with Walt and his wife Lily, and
In a photo booth.
just like an old-fashioned photo booth that would be.
You just looking at them, you can see just how much they loved each other. You can see the love in all their pictures.
And we have an exhibit of some of his travel accessories. He just had a pin, Buck Hill Falls, Lawn Bowling Club. He had just a hairbrush, a hat, bar of soap. Really, very, very basic man. Just a very basic, he lived a life, but he didn't live in like a mansion. He didn't, do anything. He knew he had wealth, but he also wanted to live life until the day he passed away.
I believe, if I remember correctly, his last vacation he ever took with his family was he rented a boat, and he took his whole family out on a boat. That was his last vacation.
Yeah, well, and that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to be with his family because that's what the man That's what he mattered the most. So we're into the part now. Walt's final projects. There's a picture of Walt with the drawing of Mineral King in 1965. Walt began the year as a Grand Marshal of the New Year's Day Tournament of Roses Parade in Pasadena, which he did quite a bit of that. He was always a part of the parade until the day he died. The theme parade was UNICEF, and it's a small world attraction that he had developed for the UNICEF Pavilion in the New York World's Fair. 2 years earlier was being installed in Disneyland. He was suffering pain in his hip that made his walking difficult. He was accustomed to covering a lot of ground daily at Disneyland and on the studio lot. He was eager to find the cause of the pain and have it fixed as soon as possible. He did seek help from his doctors, who determined that the cause might be an old polo injury to cervical vertebrae. He did seek treatment for the problem and had a device installed in his office that would enable him to apply traction to his neck for a period of time each afternoon, kind of like a massage chair, basically, kind of like a chiropractor. Hazel George, the studio nurse, would massage and apply heat to his neck, but really nothing seemed to help. Walt's desk diary is full of meetings and lunches scheduled for a variety of projects filmed in production, which did include The Jungle Book and The Happiest Millionaire, Mineral King, and the California Institute of the Arts, a project that he had long envisioned. He had selected a board of trustees for the school that included Harrison Buzz Prince, Meredith Wilson, a composer of The Music Man, Chuck Jones, artist and animator, Millet Sheets, artist, architect, and educator, and Mrs. Richard Lulu Mae Von Hagen. The Mineral King Ski Resort project was a development at this time. The company had submitted in its bid to the state of California and the Forest Service and had been accepted. On September 19th, a press conference was held in the Valley with Walt, Governor Edmund Pat Brown, members of the Forest Service, Willie Schaefer, and other members of Walt's staff. So clearly he was busy just doing a lot of different projects. He had a lot of different things going on, but his health was deteriorating. So on the afternoon on Sunday, November 6th, he drove himself to St. Joe's Hospital for surgery. Monday morning, he had some issues that were continuing to happen. Surgery was scheduled for Monday, November 7th. Went to Ron and drove on. They all went to the hospital. He was having some issues. What was going on with him? Just a lot of health issues that he has.
Lung cancer.
Lung cancer.
Well, he smoked his entire life. He actually started when he was in the Red Cross, because back during the war, when you were in the Red Cross or the military, you got free cigarettes. And everyone just smoked because no one knew the dangers of smoking back then. And so he was a lifelong smoker. He tried very hard not to let himself be photographed while smoking, just because he didn't want to promote it. But he never really quit. He was, said everyone has their vices. And unfortunately for him, that would be what brought him down.
Well, you read the thing, it said that he had a walnut-sized tumor, and when he went in, they found that it had metastasized. So the tumor itself, it just had spread. It was too late by the time it was caught, and it was caught on a routine. It had nothing to do. He didn't go in for the lung.
Yeah, it says right here they gave him 6 months to 2 years, and then he wanted to go home to Palm Springs. They did, but he was not comfortable. Returned to St. Joseph's on November 30th. He was heavily sedated for pain and too weak to continue the cobalt treatments that were used at the time. On the evening of December 14th, his wife called to tell he got out of the bed. He put an arm around me, and his grip was so strong. He was going to be well. They all thought he was going to be fine. He was encouraged by the visits. He told them how Dad used the ceiling out of his room, which was covered with 12-inch acoustic tiles and a grid. And he pointed out the whole layout of Disney World. So he was thinking about his next project until the day he died at 9:35 on December 15th, 1967, 66 is when he passed away. 66, yeah. 1966 is when he passed away.
He was only 65, which, that's young.
Yeah, for very young, but you can tell if you look at his last few years, he was not looking his best.
Now comes the sad room that makes me cry.
All right, so...
This wasn't the sad room?
No, the next room is the sad room. So the next room is a special tribute to Walter Elias Disney, talking about him passing away, some of the art that occurred just after his death. Very, very sad in the world of animation, but also with young and old alike. There's lots of pictures of Mickey and Donald just in tears. They would always be in battle together against one another. There's a picture, in fact, a very poignant picture of Walt Disney with a wreath in front of a door, and the world dressed like a man, tearing up, and with Mickey Mouse next to him, and then says, "I know how you feel, son." Very, very sad. This is part of the room in the exhibit that is not the most enjoyable, but it's still very, very sad to see. So, just a very emotional room. And I mean, I think pretty much all of us weren't alive to see Walt being alive, but it's just his impact on the world. But as you know, his heritage lives on with all of us, and it's sad, but it's also, we know that this is something Walt wanted for us to live on through his work that he's done and his vision going forward. And it's amazing. Just amazing that you see everything that he was able to do for the children of the world, for everything. His vision of, he's just a complete visionary of all his work. Now we've made it out of the museum, and now we're in the gift shop. Now the gift shop does have a lot of historical artifacts, as in, just stuff that you can buy, but there's a lot of different things on here, stuff you would not see in any of the Disney parks or the Disney shops as well. This is pretty unique. This is pretty awesome. All right, so we have made it out of the museum, ladies. This is it's been a very fun day. I mean, it's a gorgeous day here. It's Earth Day here in San Francisco. A lot of people out, doing all their things. So, Terry, I know this is like maybe your 45th trip out here to the museum. What do you think?
Man, I wish. It's my third. Spent way too much money in the gift shop because, they have lots of cool history things and books and art and all the things.
Yeah, a lot of different things you don't see at any Disney store, so there's stuff you see exclusively here at the Family Museum.
Yes, I got a Eat Like Walt. It's a book about the restaurants through the years, and a pin and a Disneyland details book. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, you can only find things in this museum that are made specifically for the museum, because it's owned by the family, not the company. So it's not the typical stuff you find at Disneyland or the other parks. So yeah, I bought myself a mug, a very cool stoneware mug, and a keychain for my mom.
Yeah. Nice, exactly. Now this is me, Michelle, and Morgan's first time, so we're going to start with you. What did you think?
I loved it.
What was your favorite part?
The gift shop.
The gift shop. Okay, so she's spending money. Michelle, this is your first time too. What do you think?
I loved it. As far as my favorite part, it varied. There was all sorts of stuff that I enjoyed. I liked the replica.
Yeah.
I liked the old TVs and the westerns and the Davy Crockett. And of course, there was the giant Cruella de Vil poster at the end that I was really, really digging on. And the gift shop, as well as my daughter, although I only bought myself a keychain and then I bought something for everybody else. So.
No, that's okay. So it has been a fun day. Again, it's here at the Presidio, 104 Montgomery Street. Of course, if you take that on GPS, it's going to take you into the heart of San Francisco, which we learned that.
Do not use the address. Just type in Disney Museum.
Yeah, Walt Disney Family Museum. That's going to get you out here. Again, waltdisney.org is the museum's web address. If you want to get any information, they do have just day passes. If you're out in the city, you want to come check it out, make sure you definitely do. Beautiful view of Alcatraz. In fact, looking at it right there, I'm going to probably throw Morgan over there here in just a few minutes, so we'll see how far that gets us. But they do have membership passes as well, lifetime membership passes if you just want to do a donation but you don't want to get anything for it. But I definitely suggest the memberships. You come out here, you support the museum. They do a lot of good work out here, a lot of nonprofit stuff, so they do want people to come out and check it out. So it's a really, really fun thing to do. Again, hit us up on Facebook. Facebook.com/Disneyverse is our Disneyverse podcast. Twitter, DisneyversePod. And of course, our email address, DisneyversePodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for joining us here today. It's been a really fun time. Have you guys had fun?
Oh yeah. It was fun. It was fun.
All right.
You can't block the
Oh, sorry. We're blocking the thing here. Sorry about that.
We need to actually go. You got 8 minutes.
All right, we got 8 minutes. So, anyway, this is Michael. Thank you very much for joining us here on the Disneyverse podcast. Until next time, we'll see you guys soon.